Hey all, it's time for another few Mighty Marvel Minutes with Kennedy Hawk. This time we're going to talk all about flipping your hero down to alter ego form. Let's begin. Flipping is one of my favorite things to do in Marvel Champions, so don't take this video the wrong way. Flipping is super fun. It is like the most exciting part of the game, especially with physical cards. When you get to flip that card over and slap it down on the table, it makes that wonderful noise. Everyone loves it. Everyone likes extra cards, and every hero gets extra cards in alter ego form, sometimes even more cards than one. But flipping has led to more game losses than any other play mistake I've ever seen myself make. 90% of the time, I lose a game, other than against Nebula and Ronan when they just surge into victory, is because I flipped at a point where I shouldn't have, and if I had just held off one turn or figured out a different way to survive whatever condition was happening, I may have won the game. So after this video, hopefully you will flip at the right time instead of the wrong time. You'll weigh the cost of flipping against the benefits it provides, and you'll still have fun playing Marvel Champions. So again, don't get me wrong, flipping is super fun. Getting extra cards and your alter ego actions is a huge temptation, but sometimes you must resist. Carol can net 3 cards, right? Because you can flip down, use Commander on someone else or yourself. You draw an extra card at the end of your turn, and then you can use Commander again the next turn. And her signature support has alter ego like bonuses in it, so you get a huge advantage from it. Don't get me wrong, when you can get those huge advantages and it's worth the risk, or the threat of losing the game isn't there, it's totally worth it, it's totally fun. Go ahead and do it. There's a ton of purposes for going to alter ego form. It always seems like it's this underutilized portion of the game, but let's just appreciate all the things that alter ego form can buy for you. You can get extra card draw, you can recover with your recovery, so you get a new use for your basic stats. You get all these cool alter ego actions, unless you're Hawkeye, womp womp. You can avoid an attack if the villain has like a giant overkill upgrade and you say, look, I gotta survive one more turn to win. Flip down and let him scheme. Who cares? Or you can consume a Confuse, right? If you've thrown Confuse on them, you know you can flip down safely, and you might draw into another Confuse if you have some sort of like Confuse spamming deck and you don't want it to sit there for too many turns. So lots of great reasons to flip, and many more. So make sure you talk about your favorite flipping experiences in the comments below. But now, let's talk about some of the reasons maybe you shouldn't flip. There's a lot of hidden costs to flipping. A lot of people think flipping down, okay, that means that like I'm not able to play hero actions and off turns and things like that. But there's a huge cost to flipping down that a lot of people don't consider when they jump down. They only think of the benefits. So each time you flip down, you should really weigh the benefits against the cost. What do you gain? And is it worth a villain's scheme activation? Against a villain like Rhino, where they have one scheme, maybe it doesn't matter so much. He doesn't have a ton of 3 boost icon cards in his deck, depending on the modular set, so he's probably going to scheme for 1 to 2. But against someone like Claw, or someone with even higher scheme values or higher boost icons, you can easily get 4 to 5 threat placed on the scheme. And that's terrifying. So if you have to think, here's an example. Jane's going to flip down to Alter Ego because she really wants an additional card. Claw gets 1 boost card, and he places 3 threat. So if the only benefit Jane got was 1 extra card, is that 1 extra card going to make up the deficit of 3 threat placed on the main scheme? Is there margin in the main scheme threat limit for this? A lot of times it's a lot easier in multiplayer than it is in solo, but even in multiplayer sometimes, if you flip and someone else ends up having to flip, or someone else draws in advance, it can be very dangerous. So always think about, are the benefits I'm getting offsetting this cost of extra scheme? Other things to consider, never forget about those chances at double schemes. There's going to be 2 advances in almost every setup for Marvel Champions, and a lot of villains have specific extra scheme cards like Rage of Ultron from Ultron. If you haven't seen those 4 cards pop up yet, there's a pretty good chance that you might draw one, and nothing is worse than flipping down, having the villain scheme with 0 boost, and then revealing an advance and having 5 fat threat placed on the scheme. It can just destroy your day. You do get to look through the encounter card discard pile anytime you want. So don't do this every 3 seconds because it'll really annoy your table mates. But before making a critical decision like flipping at like a game losing or winning moment, maybe glance through the encounter deck discard pile and see if there's 2 advances there. If there are, you're going to feel a lot better about life. And I've gotten to the point now where I just track, have I seen advance, yes or no? And in some solo games, if I haven't seen advance, I just have to refuse to flip because it's way too risky, and this is completely anecdotal and not based in statistical fact at all. But every time I flip and don't threat out, and then I say, okay, well, this encounter card's going to be advanced, it's advanced by a large margin. There's a lot of heroes that like to flip. So again, I'm trying to emphasize, don't get me wrong, flipping is super fun. If you're playing She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, Black Widow, or many of the other flipping heroes, you're going to want to flip. But make sure you think about ways to compensate for that, right? Black Widow has some Confuse in her kit. She-Hulk has the ability to do some thwarting in Alter Ego form. Miss Marvel can burst for a ton of thwart. So bring things that might help you do additional thwarting or allow for additional flipping, like Sonic Rifle or Foiled or Counterintelligence, many Justice things. The other thing you can do is you can try to lower the threat really low before you flip, because then you feel like you have this safety margin. Use the main scheme to your advantage. Pay attention to those threat thresholds. You can either lower the scheme down to basically 0 and then flip, or you can use this other technique that I like to use called bursting the scheme. So here's an example. We're going to go through Claw as an example because it's kind of a double-edged sword. So let's consider we're in Claw 1A or 1B, and there's 5 threat on the main scheme. And you want to flip down. So you're like, I really need to flip down. I've got no health left. I gotta go heal. With 5 threat in the main scheme, this is the absolute worst time to flip. Let's math it out, because one thing you cannot do when flipping down is forget about that auto threat that happens at the beginning of the villain stage. So you're going to place one threat at the beginning of the villain stage. That's going to pop scheme 1B and force you into scheme 2A. This is going to spawn another minion, fresh minion coming out of the deck. That's great. Claw's now going to scheme onto 2B instead of 1B. So he's going to place 2 plus a boost card. Let's say his boost card is a 2. This minion's going to scheme. Maybe the minion only has 1 scheme, but you're now sitting at 5 threat on scheme 2B, and you started the turn in scheme 1B, and you haven't even revealed your encounter card yet. That's terrifying. So always consider that. The other thing to always consider when you're flipping down, a lot of times I'll look at my deck and see I have 6 cards left and think, oh, I'm not going to deck out. And then I flip down and drop to 6, and all of a sudden I have decked out. So now I'm in Alter Ego form. I have an extra encounter card, so double the chance to get a dance, and bad things can happen. So instead of doing this, don't forget about that auto threat, because we could change this situation. Now let's say there was only 4 threats on Underground Distribution. The auto threat moves this to 5, and Claw schemes for 2 plus a boost. Let's say this time his boost is a 3. So that could have been 5 threat placed onto that second scheme. You're now really only placing 1 threat, because 1 more threat hits you to 1B's limit. All that excess threat doesn't even matter, because it just gets cleared when you go to 2A. So by flipping at the right time, you've gotten basically 4 free thwart that you would have had to like claw your way back from, pun intended, before. So always use that threat threshold to your advantage. If you can ever eat up a large portion of the villain's scheme activation into like threat overage or whatever you want to call it, that can provide like a huge boon to you, and it really mitigates that cost of flipping. Sadly, this is still somewhat of a bad deal against Claw, because you're still going to discard minions, and even though Claw triggers you into 2A, that minion that comes out is still going to get to scheme. So you will still get a little bit of scheme on 2B, but not as bad as if Claw and the minion had scheme, which would have been doubly bad. Think about the cost of recovering, right? Recovering is another thing you want to do to go to Alter Ego. But remember, there's a lot of forms of healing that exist in hero form, whether it's in protection with med team or even running basic first aids. A well-timed first aid, if it can prevent you from flipping down, can avoid 3 to 4 threat. And if we think about how we'd remove that 3 to 4 threat, even in like an aspect that's good at it, For Justice. For Justice is going to be an effective 3 resources, because the 2 for Justice plus the card itself. If First Aid avoids that scheme activation, then you're only spending 2 resources for basically the same benefit. So you have 1 less card in your hand, so I guess it kind of comes out in the wash. But at the same time, you don't have to draw into that thwart card and all sorts of other things. So well-timed healing can really provide a benefit. And it's really this sort of strategy you want to take to try to stay in hero form for as long as possible. I've seen a lot of people talk about this with Spider-Man. You almost want to get him down to like 1 hit point. Flip down, use Aunt May twice to heal 8, flip back up, and then hopefully you don't have to flip again the rest of the game. I like to call it walking this heroic edge. You really have to figure out when is a good time to flip down. All heroes like to flip down. All heroes like extra cards. There's not a hero yet that doesn't. But an ideal flip is well-timed, and that means finding a time when you can slip that flip in without it destroying the villain's disadvantage that you may have created. Or it means, holding off on that flip 1 more turn or until the ideal turn. So when you're about to flip, always consider, can I last 1 more turn in hero form before flipping down? Is the 1 extra card worth it, or are there other added benefits that make this worthwhile? Will the board state be better next turn? Maybe I've got 2 minions out there, and I know there's melees in my deck that I might draw, so I could wipe them out, and flipping won't be as disadvantageous. Does a teammate need to flip this turn? Maybe I want to flip because I want extra cards, but Rocket's sitting over here at 1 health, and he really needs to flip. And how low in health can I go, right? It's a game of how low can you go. If you can get down to 1 hit point and then flip and have a huge recover to bring yourself back up, flip down the next turn, recover at the beginning of the second turn, go back up, that's going to be a really optimized flip, and you're going to have put it off, holding a little bit more threat off the scheme, letting you get a little bit more board control before you, do yourself this disservice. So just some final summary tips. It doesn't say this on the slide, but again, remember, flipping is fun. I'm not telling you to never flip. Flipping is super fun, you should do it, and you should love it. But think about whether or not the board state can handle it. Flip when the benefit outweighs the cost, or if the calculated risk is low, right? If you've got 20 threat before the scheme pops, flip down all you want, and you can make that up over time as you ramp up. Don't let the auto threat advance the scheme, especially, this is mainly in solo, do not let that happen. You want to, if you're going to let the villain scheme, mitigate as much of that into that scheme threshold as you can. Remember how many advances and extra insight or scheme activation cards are in the discard pile. Discard pile. Can any of those things bite you in the rear end because you flipped and just chanced into the wrong cards? This says consider healing in alter ego form, but what it should say is consider healing in hero form. There's a lot of ways to heal in hero form. I'm not promoting Second Wind by any means. I know a lot of people like that card. I'm not a big fan of Second Wind. I think it's a little bit overcosted. But one of the added benefits of Second Wind is it's preventing you from going down. So yes, it costs 3 resources or whatever to heal 5. I guess it's 4 resources because the card itself. You're also preventing 3 to 4 threat. So if you think about it as 4 resources to heal 5 and prevent 3 to 4 threat, that's a good deal. So remember, walk that heroic edge, figure out, can I last one more turn? Can I be a hero for a little bit longer before I chill back at my apartment, get my extra cards, and then come back and defeat the villain? Thanks for tuning in. We will have another video tomorrow, and then we'll take the weekend off and be back again on Monday with a few Mighty Marvel Minutes.